Hey guys, Kaznarius here. 2021 was a hell of a year, and it was one of the best years for gaming I've ever had. So, with how much I loved this year's releases, I decided to make a list from worst to best of all the games I played through this year. But first, let's get a couple things out of the way. I'm working off Jeff Keighley time. That means I'm counting games released from December 10th of 2020 to December 10th of 2021. Second, I'm not counting games I didn't play. There's just a lot of stuff I didn't get to, like Ratchet & Clank, so if a game you really liked didn't make it to the list, that's probably why. Third, I break my own rule on the first game I cover, in that it's the one game on this list I didn't play through, but you'll find out why soon enough. Anyway, with all that said, rockin' stone.
Cyberpunk 2077.
What an absolute clusterfuck. I can handle janky, weird games that are haphazardly thrown together, but I'm sorry, when you charge me $90 Canadian on day one, no ifs, ands, or buts, your game better function properly. Non-stop glitches, missing parts of the map, unkept promises, Cyberpunk 2077 stands above the rest as the reason we as consumers should be cautious of buying into marketing hype. Now, while I call this game the piece of rotting shit that it is, I have to acknowledge that CD Projekt Red seems to be taking steps to fixing it. Yeah, that's commendable, and one of my favorite games ever was garbage on release, and if what people online are saying is true, the story is probably actually good. The thing is, when I talk about games I played in 2021, I'm not going to leave this out because it could be a masterpiece someday. I'm going to talk about the experiences I had running this game on my PS4 in the year 2021. So here's a couple notes I wrote down when I was playing through this game on December 12th of 2020. Playing this game at launch, it hardly kept 30 frames in the open world and grinded to somewhere in the 10s when I got in my first car chase. My first steps into Night City were greeted by people who had heads akin to Squidward's house. Jackie drove me to my apartment and one of the billboards in the area legit said, "Error, file missing." I feel fucking embarrassed to own this game. Now, before anyone tells me I shouldn't have bought it for PS4 because it runs better on newer consoles, just cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks, okay? It's not my fault for playing this game on last-gen hardware. It's CD Projekt Red's fault for not properly optimizing it to be in a playable state. And if that's an impossible task, then they shouldn't have released the game on those consoles in the first place. The devs have been saying for years that there's so much to do in Night City, and they want you to be immersed in V's story, and the people they meet and the choices they make, and something experience their sprawling open world. But I can't see myself living in V's world when it is literally crumbling around me every couple minutes.
12 minutes.
I heard about 12 minutes from Pork Chopper when he said this to me in our Game Awards podcast.
The story twist is actually really gross, and I don't understand why somebody would want to make a game like this. I'm all for art. This is not a work of art.
I don't think anything could have piqued my interest more than that statement, honestly. I love disgusting art shit. I love narrative-driven games, and 12 minutes premise of a recurring time loop in a suffocating apartment is a great hook, with you inevitably dying at the end of each loop and having to learn more answers each time to progress in the story. I like the cramped setting. I really loved following each character's individual arc. I also had a weird love for the wife's humming at the start of each loop. I don't know, weird thing. I just kind of liked it. In the first couple hours, I started putting things together and asking questions based on plot threads that I was excited to see the resolutions to. But the problem was that when I finally got those answers, everything fell apart. Now, for context, I'm usually the person in my friends group who's too dense to figure out the plot twist in every piece of media until about the very end. But I figured out this game's plot twist relatively early on, and it sucks. The ending of 12 minutes is contrived, mired in really bad revelations, and asks a suspension of disbelief from the audience that would make the average Fast and the Furious movie tell it to maybe just calm down a little bit. It's a shame that this falls apart so spectacularly by the end, because I think I speak for most people when I say that it really did have me in the first half, and seeing the credits roll made me truly reflect. Not on the game, per se, but my playtime to see if I finished it fast enough to get a refund.
I can't do this.
Wait.
I'm sorry.
Babe?
I can't be here right now.
Babe?
Haven.
I went into this game expecting a lot, to be perfectly honest. I learned about Haven right after playing through Fury, the game maker's last game. And honestly, I got pretty excited when I learned that this new game would be some kind of weird co-op game based around a couple who escaped to this deserted planet. I really couldn't wait to try this game with my partner. Turns out, I totally could. Because this game has problems. You see, the many charms and positives this game throws at you overstay their welcome very quickly. And that's really saying something coming out of Fury, which basically did just one thing, but just did it really well. First of all, don't play this game on your own. There are bits where these two are unironically ERPing.
What's that thing you say? Let's not start pushing before the panties are pulled down?
And I know sitting in front of a TV by yourself seeing these two go at it would just be really awkward. I know this would be awkward because it felt awkward watching them with somebody else beside me wanting to desperately hit the skip button.
Awesome.
Your butt's awesome.
I agree to the fisting, but I'd really like to claim your ass.
Haven revolves around exploring the planet and finding ship parts, and the exploration is usually done by stylish hoverboard gliding. The problem is, not even an hour into the game, I felt myself checking out as me and my partner took turns driving both characters. And that's not because I got bored waiting for my turn to play again. It's because with most of the locales on the planet looking very similar, exploration felt incredibly monotonous. Sure, there's berries and plants to collect and healing items to find, but the rewards for clearing an area feel less like rewards and more like weird compensation for wasting your time. Or rather, our time. Combat could have been a saving grace for this game, but its system actually felt about as simplistic and monotonous as the exploration did. You've got like 4 options between types of attacks, healing, and double attacks, and that's about it. Now, I'll admit that a lot of battles forced us to communicate and guard the other, or strategize and talk on the fly, and I think that's really good for a game that revolves around a relationship. The problem is that the amount of things you can do feels extremely limited, and fighting the same enemies that you know the weakness to makes battles start to feel less like a thrilling co-op experience, and more like a chore you both have to deal with to progress. And I don't think the game had to be this way. Perhaps if the devs allowed each player to build into different stats and let them build their characters in certain ways, players would find strategies that really play off of one another, like having a character spec more into shielding or having better blasts or something like that. I mean, heck, if you gave these characters unique skills, it would actually be interesting to see how they work off one another's strengths, cementing their relationship through gameplay mechanics. Speaking of the relationship, yeah, I get that Kay and you love each other, but man, this game likes to lay it on thick with the ooey gooey lovey talk. Sometimes, literally.
Okay. Do you mind if we switch sides?
Why?
I don't know. I just feel like a change.
Okay. Ugh, this is all sticky.
Yeah, and whose fault is that?
I guess I can't really complain.
Obviously not. That'll teach you to pay attention next time.
No More Heroes 3.
In 2017, Suda51 came out on stage for the Nintendo Switch press conference.
Hey. Oh, that didn't go very well. Hi everyone, I'm Suda51 from Grasshopper.
I feel like this clip alone pretty much encapsulates this man. Now, I think it's important to show you this clip, not just because this motherfucker was so loud the audio guy cut him off, but because this was the first news of anything No More Heroes related in like 7 years. And now, in 2021, my fellow No More Heroes fans, we are eating very well tonight. No More Heroes 3 is your friend that you knew in high school that's recently become bi-curious and has contacted you in hopes of fostering a friendship that may or may not result in mutual fellatio. And while it may seem like a weird request at first, the benefits of taking him up on his offer might be better than you think. By the way, that's not a real story. You're busting into crazy beam katana combos and then flinging guys around the room, then stopping time, going sicko mode after perfect dodge, popping boys with the screw fucker dead kick, and then they spray this weird metallic rainbow blood, and all the while you're trying to hide your erection from your homie sitting beside you. Most of the new enemies actually have more varied movesets compared to the hundreds of variations of guy in suit from the last games. So in terms of actual variety in the fights, the game is actually definitely a step in the right direction. The bosses are the highlight here though, and they are just as fucking weird as they've always been. They really dialed up the difficulty on some of these fights, and I'd really save your adult gamer diaper for Velvet Chair Girl. That one was really tough. The problem with No More Heroes 3 is that you're having a good time 60% of the time you're playing the game. The other 40%, you're driving around this bullshit open world that feels completely lifeless and doesn't carry even a fraction of the soul the rest of the game does. Like, I genuinely don't understand why they put the effort into half-assing this open world when pretty much everyone who actually played the first game can tell you the open world is probably the worst part of that game. I mean, sure, it was cute to see it running on a Wii, but here? Well, it just reminds me why games have evolved past the need for an obligatory open world to sell themselves. Plus, you're doing these boring-ass minigames so you can afford to fight the next guy, and all the while Suda51 desperately hopes you don't realize that they took out pre-boss stages. Yeah, that's right, there's no actual pre-boss stages, just little arenas to fight the bosses and goons in. I can only guess it was a time constraint or budget thing, so they could focus on making the rest of the game look as stylish as it is, but their absence really hurts the pacing. I'm really torn on No More Heroes 3. On one hand, I'm happy it exists, and I really missed the feeling the best parts of this game gave me. On the other, I'm frustrated that the mistakes the series apparently learned from are on full display here. If you roll with the punches, you can have a good time, but let's not kid ourselves, this whole series has been the video game poster child for style over substance. Actually, you know what? Here's the best thing that defines what this game is. Okay, look at the overworld map. You see the red parts? These are inaccessible. And I don't mean you unlock them later. I mean Suda has them there for the sole purpose of making the map look like a star.
Monster Hunter Rise.
I've been playing Monster Hunter since the 4U days on my 3DS, and it's been great seeing how the series has evolved and innovated into what it's become today. I think that's why I've loved this series so much leading up to Rise. The series just doesn't regress. Every new entry just finds a way to improve on the last game that came out. A couple years ago, I was on a certain podcast bitching about how old Monster Hunter and Monster Hunter World were going to split the fan base in two, but Rise pretty much put all my fears about the series to rest. Sprawling, visceral, lush areas with tons of weird-ass wildlife to see, different builds and alternative playstyles for each weapon, and a grapple hook that turns level traversal, one of the most tedious parts of the old games, into something that you can get really creative with. You can just fucking be Spider-Man. Even though Rise brought back a lot of the stuff from old Monster Hunter games, it still found ways to improve on World. Like, I actually think its core gameplay is better than World's. Getting people to join hunts has never been as easy as it is here. Seriously, every time I opened a new quest through my Hunter rank climb, I'd have 3 people join me in minutes. And that's a far cry from the absolute bullshit plaguing joining people in the last game. Nintendo Switch's online service is a joke, and pretty much every game has dogshit online, but somehow this game doesn't. This game is great, and I should have spent more time with it. It probably would be higher on my list if I did. Man, when that DLC hits.
Neo. The World Ends With You.
The World Ends With You came out about 14 years ago, and it's an undisputed JRPG classic. I've played through it like 7 times, and for like 8 years, it was my favorite game, period. I don't want to spoil too much about that game, but I'll just say that if you've ever been on the fence about playing it, you absolutely 100% should. It's got one of the most unique combat systems I've ever played, an art style that looks amazing despite the hardware it was released on, and one of the greatest soundtracks in a video game ever. It's a story about personal growth that I think is timeless and genuinely heartfelt, and if you have the means to play it, do so. So yeah, when the sequel to it was randomly announced at the end of 2020, I had a lot of expectations going into it. Would it live up to everything I loved about the first game? Well, the answer is no, and honestly, that's okay. Neo The World Ends With You is a game that, in spite of trying to do its own thing, really feels like an epilogue to the first game at times. Skirting around spoilers here, but Whereas the first game was a very intimate adventure, Neo wants to expand the cast as much as it can and have the characters bounce off one another, rather than really getting into one character's head. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means that a lot of our cast's personal growth feels a lot more subtle than it did in the first game. And as a result, I left this game thinking our protagonists hardly changed throughout the adventure. It's not that they didn't change, it's that there were so many small changes across a long time with such a large cast that some felt insignificant. Reading a lot about this game online, and hell, even in our own comment section, shoutouts to Big Chungus, I feel like there's a lot I missed in my first playthrough, and I definitely owe it to myself to play through it again. One thing I can say that really carried over from the first game is the style. Playing through the demo for the first time, I felt like I'd come back home. I loved seeing how the city had transitioned from pixels on my DS, these massive sprawling streets and looming buildings that add to this impeccable sense of scale wherever you go. Shibuya still feels like a well-lived-in place, and the changes the devs made to the city felt meaningful. The combat is, well, it's a bit strange. The original game had you doing various gestures on the touchscreen to perform attacks, but without a touchpad they really had to do something different for the transition to controller. The new system has you assigning attacks to different buttons, and I'm not gonna lie, fights tend to be an absolute mess at times. It's still fun, don't get me wrong. It just feels like the most strategizing I need to do in this game is before fights when I'm selecting my pins, because the best tactic in every fight is to literally press every button as fast as you can. This game had a lot to follow up, and truth be told, it would never live up to how that original game made me feel playing it as a teenager on my DS. That experience is rooted in nostalgia, and it's just too hard to beat that. But Neo the World Ends With You is still, by all accounts, a great game that's worth playing. If what you're seeing on screen right now makes you want to go out and buy this game, don't. Play The World Ends With You instead. But after that, yeah, this game is a worthy sequel, and you should definitely play it.
Who's the enemy? Who's the enemy? Who's the enemy?
It Takes Two.
It Takes Two is a game where a couple gets turned into toys to rebuild their relationship. Because of magic bullshit, parts of their house become crazy giant theme park death traps where you need to work together to progress. Now, I wasn't really so hot on the story. I felt like it played a lot of its beats way too safe for my liking, and the plot definitely could have gone a lot farther with the themes it was going with. However, that really isn't why you play this game. You play it because it's a really great co-op puzzle platformer that feels like a roller coaster ride the whole way through. Somehow, basically every section of this game manages to be just as creative and innovative as the last, and every time it could have stopped being fun and gotten stale, they throw a set piece or a boss fight at you that make you use your powers in a really cool way, and then they move you on to the next area. This game just never gives itself time to get stale, and I appreciate that. In between tool-focused sections, you have really tight and responsive platforming sections that feel great to pull off. Plus there's these really cool challenge segments where you can just kind of fuck around and play little mini-games against your partner. And some of the side games were actually weirdly addicting. There's a particular tower puzzle that me and my girlfriend spent 40 minutes on, and that shit was completely unnecessary, but it was just still a fun thing to do, and the game has tons of these fun little things to do that are completely unnecessary. Sure, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could improve the game or have some of the stages feel more relevant to the couple's conflict, but the game is just simple fun that you can blast through with somebody else in like 8 hours. And I don't know if it's just because Haven as a co-op game let me down so much, but this game really connected with me. Like, it's just a really good partner experience that you should try.
Metroid Dread.
I've never beat a Metroid game until this year, and you know what? I probably never would have if this shit didn't happen.
We want to seek your forgiveness that we will be delaying the release of the expansion pack by 2 weeks.
So 2 extra weeks before Endwalker meant 2 extra weeks for me to finally get my grubby gamer hands on a series that I've been neglecting all these years. I basically binged this whole series, and yeah, holy shit, I can't believe I slept on these games for so long. As a guy who's been a Metroid virgin until 2 weeks ago, do I think that Metroid Dread is a good game? Yes! Holy shit, does Dread live up to the hype. The fun of exploration and backtracking is just as good, if not made better by new additions that cut down on bullshit. The allure of a new power makes beating a boss all the more enticing, and damn does this game look good. I honestly think everything in this game, excluding the soundtrack, is just some next level shit, and it deserves every ounce of praise it gets. Thanks, David Jaffe.
Crap, Bush League.
Hey, fellow Metroid fans, we can all agree that Super is the best one in this series, right? Like, Everybody knows that this game is a masterpiece in terms of its sprite work, atmosphere, puzzle solving, and momentum, but nobody seems to want to admit that Ridley and Crocomire are actual dogshit fights that you win by mindlessly spamming missiles.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Metroid Dread succeeds every boss in Super Metroid by having every major fight be a test of pattern recognition and skill with multiple phases. You aren't just jumping and shooting a weak point, you're running around, you're sliding, you're countering the boss to do a big fat punisher on them, and when you finally do get that timing down and you pull off that counter, it doesn't just feel good because you get to deal a lot of damage, it shows that you've grown from the fight and gotten better after every failure. Emmys are a great addition too. I've heard a lot of talk about people, dreading entering into another chase with these things, but I honestly thought each of these encounters was more fun than the last. I never really felt like I had a problem with these guys, and the sense of urgency I had running away from them was more fun than frustrating. This game is every bit as good as you've heard it is, and I would have a really hard time arguing with somebody who left this game thinking it was the best one in the series.
Deep Rock Galactic. Wait, Kaz, this game didn't come out this year, you dumb fuck.
In Deep Rock Galactic, you'll be mining materials, fixing mining equipment, setting up pipelines, using various tools for traversal, and of course, killing the shit out of hundreds of bugs that want to eat you. And God, does it feel good. This was the one game I mentioned that I'm sort of cheating by putting it on here because it released like 3 years ago, but this game really got its hooks into us. When we started playing January last year, I don't think we had any idea how much time we'd be spending with this game. Like, it is just the go-to for our group. Anytime, any day, it is the game to play with the boys. There's so much to love about this game. I could talk about the feeling of camaraderie when you complete a tough mission, or the hidden randomly generated cosmetics you find, or the Doom cover moments when you're pinned down and have hundreds of enemies coming at you, or just the stupid bullshit that happens. I just can't cover every aspect of this game here, but I think any of Thunderclub's Deep Rock videos showcase why you should play this game, and its frequent updates and expanding player base give me hope for the future that will be rocking and stoning for years to come. I'm a huge fan of games that have builds that kind of let the player express themselves, and I think the overclock system in this game has made each mission way more fun. Take the default revolver for the gunner. Normally, the gun fires a straight shot with solid damage, and that's nice, but then you find the magic bullets overclock, which makes you do less damage, but all your shots ricochet to hit enemies. Now I know what you're thinking. Kaz, you just turned this revolver into a shitty baby gun for dumb fuck bastard babies. But then you realize you can make the bullets explode.
Weapons. Silver 45 pistol. Enemies. All dead.
And Kaz's favorite game of 2021 is Omori.
It's taken me a long time to really get my thoughts together on this game, and that's despite the fact that I played it in February and proceeded to talk about it for hours with my friend on the channel. Fun fact, here's a line I said in that video that feels kind of funny to look back on now. Thanks for understanding, and I appreciate all 35 of you. So let's start with why it might feel weird to you that this little indie Kickstarter game made in RPG Maker is my favorite game of 2021. Let's get this out of the way. It doesn't have the best gameplay on this list. It's got relatively standard turn-based battles that you've probably played before, although I honestly really like what it does. Characters learn a huge pool of moves, but you can only bring 4 into combat, and that forces you to figure out how you want your characters to synergize. Whenever I discuss this game with somebody new, I always like asking them what their main strategy for getting through the game was, because usually I get an answer that was actually very different from my playthrough. As I've mentioned before, I really like when a combat system in a single-player game lets you, the player, express yourself through the options it gives you. Combat is good, but it's not really what carries the game. It's a good part that works in tandem with everything else that makes Omori such a meaningful experience. Okay, let's rip another band-aid off right now. This game is hard to play at times, and I don't mean in terms of difficulty. There is a lot of really dark subject matter here, including suicide, grief, and self-harm. This game is a lot, and if any of that triggers you, I don't blame you for avoiding it, and obviously, I won't be showing anything crazy here. On the surface, Amori is about a kid escaping into his dreams and how the world around him influences the adventures he has in his mind. When you actually look at how all the different ways the things in his life manifest themselves within his dreams, certain pieces of this world become so compelling in hindsight as more of the story is revealed. The bosses you fight, the way your party members treat you, the adventures you go on, everything you do is connected to something in the real world, even if some of those connections feel insignificant compared to others. And there's a lot of really interesting things you notice about the world the more you play. The artwork has this aesthetic that's like a teenager's sketchbook mixed with Magicant from Mother, and it perfectly captures the imagination of the player character. It feels inviting and sort of cotton candy-like, but it has purpose. Of course, when you're dealing in the realm of dreams, that also includes nightmares. Amori has some of the most potent horror sections I've played through in years, and a lot of its parts have been permanently burned into my mind with how disturbed I felt playing through them, and that's the way good horror should be. However, in spite of that though, in spite of some of the genuinely awful nightmare-fuel stuff this game throws at you, Amori still somehow manages to tell an incredibly wholesome story about a group of kids growing up. I have to be really vague here, but I honestly think it's impossible to leave this game without having a strong emotional reaction somewhere along the way. No matter who you are, you will find a story beat somewhere in this game that you will sincerely relate to. Amori can be emotionally rough, but when it all comes together, all of it feels so incredibly worth it. Its world, its gorgeous artwork, its characters, and most importantly, its heart have stayed with me in a way that I've never really experienced in a game before, and because of that, Amori is my favorite game of 2021.